Hello, everyone. I just wanted to send out a quick update on the PPP. I know it's a little confusing, so what I wanted to do today is just go through quickly what we all want to start working on when it comes to the PPP so that we're ready to account for this correctly over the next few weeks. So one thing that's very important to note is that the timeline could potentially be different for all of us as we begin to receive the PPP funds. So keep in mind that your bank or lender may have a slightly different date range than we were originally given. I have seen a few people who said their bank actually moved it up from the 4/26 to 6/30. So that's really what we want to know. So again, going back to what is the PPP, what this is a payroll protection program that's designed to get people back to work. So while it's designed to help our business, it's also designed to help our employees. So because of that, there's a few caveats we really want to make sure that we understand so that we utilize it the best way we can while setting us up for success as we move forward. So the first resource I have available, and I'll be sending out a recap email on this is the worksheet that we covered during our call last week. And again, one thing that we really want to work through is what does this program look like based on different labor scenarios. Again, you only have 8 weeks. So for a lot of us, that's a tight time frame, right? So we really want to be managing our labor during those 8 weeks to make sure that we understand how much of the funds we're able to use and get forgiven versus how much are going to end up turning into a loan. So again, I will send out the details of this worksheet, but this is really what I would recommend setting up. You take your total PPP loan, you look at your labor that you want to have in the next 8 weeks. Is it managers only? Is it employees? Am I paying my employees even though they're not working? All of those scenarios are, this is your decision and what's best for your business. So again, I encourage you to work through this worksheet first. The next thing that we want to cover is what does this look like weekly to my business, right? So this is the payroll piece. This is saying how much do I have available? How much do I want to spend in labor? Do I want to have a notice to my employees that I'm, compensating you X amount over the 8 weeks, regardless of working? Is it a week by week decision? These are all your, putting on your owner hats, your leader hats. This is your decision. And again, that's something you have to decide today, but you do want to make sure that you're at least evaluating week over week for the funds that you're getting forgiven. The next thing that we then want to say is, what does this look like to my weekly budget? So again, we have our weekly budget set up. We've been going through that every week. What does the PPP do? How do I account for it? Now, again, this is something that can take a little bit to sort of wrap our heads around. To the extent that the loan is forgiven, that is technically income to your business. The good news is it's income that will ultimately not be reported. So you won't be paying taxes on that income, but it is technically income to your business because it's an expense that you didn't pay. Now there's some recommendation out there of just keep the money in a separate account, pay for everything, and then just get that forgiven. To get the ultimate tax benefit, we want to make sure that we're still recording all of the expenses that we spend out of the PPP funds. And then for our P&L, what we're going to do is actually show the income to the extent of the forgiven portion. Now, this, what I've done here is added a line on my income line for every week. And the reason is because I really want us to start to understand the cash flow that we now have available because of the PPP being forgiven. So what you'll see here is my first week, which would be this week. I don't have PPP, right? That's assuming it hasn't come through yet. I'm operating at a very limited capacity, just trying to get by. I have my labor, I'm running at kind of margins I don't really like. I'm at a 66 prime cost, right? And ultimately, I'm losing $6,400 this week. So what does the PPP do to change that? Well, because my labor is now forgiven, right? That to the extent that I pay my employees over the next 8 weeks, that portion will be forgiven. Again, there's some wording on, employee headcount. I have not seen anything directly from the SBA on that. So for now, we're assuming that 75% mark, which is what is built into our original forgiveness form. So assuming that my labor is forgiven, that means that I'm actually going to have an add back. So I have $8,400 in total labor expense for next week. That's part of my operation. So what I'm then going to have is now an $8,400 add back, right? Because I'm paying my employees, but I'm also going to get that forgiven, which means I really am going to not have to pay the loan back. So I'm going to add that back to my income level. Now notice on my worksheet that I'm not adjusting my sales to the top. This is still my sales. I'm still assuming $15,000 in sales, but now I'm going to add that back. And the reason it's important to add back is because now, unlike last week, where I had very limited operating profit going into my expenses and I wasn't able to pay those operating expenses, now I'm back to, at least in terms of my operating profit, I'm back to where I want to be, right? So now what I'm saying is I can pay my rent, I can pay my utilities, I can pay those other expenses. So right now it's showing a net profit loss, but that's because I haven't actually filled in those other expenses that I wasn't filling in last week because I didn't have the cash flow to do it. So now what I want to do is go in and plug in all those operating expenses to see what can I now pay that I couldn't pay before. The final piece of this is really to look at our monthly. So what I recommend is start with June. Again, work through David's awesome Google Sheets. They're amazing, right? So you should have two. You should have your weekly, which is sort of I'm in my war zone, I'm fighting through it. But then ultimately my monthly. What is this going to look like once we get to June and July and things start to come back to normal? What are my realistic sales? Again, I wouldn't put 100% because we don't know. And realistically, what do I think my sales are going to be in June? Remember, in June, most of us will have a full month of PPP adjustment. So I'm going to have income in June to offset my full month of labor in June, which means June from a P&L is going to look amazing. But what do I think July and August are going to be? What do I want to keep to make sure that when the PPP goes away, I'm ready to move forward for July, August, and September? So again, I think this is just a starting point, but hopefully this helps us all kind of see how we think we should structure the PPP on the budgets that we've already been doing, because you've done all the groundwork, right? Hopefully by now you've done your weekly, you've done your monthly, you have all the expenses. Now what we want to do is just plug in what do we think that forgiveness piece will look like. Now, one thing you'll notice is this PPP adjustment is only to the extent that it's forgiven, which goes back to our original document. How much of this do we think we can get forgiven? Because the rest is just a loan, right? That's not income. The only income is to the extent that it's forgiven. And again, that's income you're not going to be taxed on, at least so far, according to all the guidance, that it's actually not reportable income, but we want to show it on our P&L because that was our, that's the forgiveness piece, right? We didn't pay those expenses, so this is that income that we have for our P&L, and this is our business's performance, thankfully, to the PPP program. So I hope this makes sense. Again, this is just a starting point. We'll be doing this on Wednesday during the call, but I wanted to send it out today because now is really the time that we're getting a lot of information on hopefully what our PPP will look like, the timing of our PPP, and because we're under such a tight window of that 8 weeks, we really want to be doing this work sooner rather than later. Again, our recommendations on how we would do it, please feel free to reach out if you have any questions. Thank you again and have a great day.